All right.
Clap sync. 3, 2, 1. Cool.
Oh, wait. Let's do that again. We fucked that up.
Sure. Clap sync. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
There we go.
I think either worked. Okay.
Good shit.
So, welcome back to the podcast, everybody. 36% with Brett and Adam.
A good time on the one and only December 7th of 2018.
The one and only December 7th.
Isn't that interesting? It's our only one.
I know.
Only
crazy.
one we got.
Fleeting, truly. Representative of life.
Yeah.
As is. All things considered, our week's going much better than a lot of other people. We'll touch on all of the headlines.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
Well, not even all of them. We'll touch on some of the many headlines.
Oh, yes.
Really, truly a tale, a saga, if you will. We've had tragedy, heartbreak, comedy, deceit. So we're going to get into it.
Let's get into it. Let's get into it, Brett. Fuck this. Let's get into it.
Okay. So, exciting news from the Trump administration this week, as per usual. If you'll remember a couple months ago, it's been a while, Nikki Haley, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations.
Former governor of South Carolina and woman who is very broke.
Yes, all of these things. She announced her impending resignation from the United Nations as the U.S. ambassador.
Just yeeted on out of there.
And, well, we finally have a replacement for her.
And surprise, they come from Fox News.
Right. So President Trump announced earlier today on Friday that he's going to nominate Heather Nauert. I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing her last name. But she's the current State Department spokeswoman. She's a former Fox News host. And pretty soon she's going to be the next ambassador to the UN. So we've harped on the UN a lot on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Just to give the briefest of brief overviews of it, really all our ambassador to the UN needs to be is a spokesperson for American interests. Now, it would behoove us to have a diplomat in there, someone who's great at making ties and working with other nations. We've had people that are completely inept at doing that. We've had people that have been masterful diplomats. My predictions is that this person will probably be more of the former and less of the latter.
Oh, yeah. I have no doubt about that.
The only reason I say that, it's nothing against, well, it's some against Fox News.
Yeah.
But in terms of qualifications, before joining the Trump administration, as I said, she's currently the spokesperson for the State Department. Heather Nauert has had no government or foreign policy experience. She was an anchor on Fox News, Fox and Friends for a while. Before that, the closest thing she has to foreign policy experience is she did some overseas assignments for ABC in Baghdad for a while after the war. And, I mean, beyond that, really, she's someone who apparently can work in a business setting. She can communicate the things that she's told to communicate. So, at least to that end of being a spokesperson for the administration, I think she'll fulfill that aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, granted, like, being on Fox News, you get trained very well in how to lie to the people consistently.
Exactly.
And that is the number one qualification for becoming a Trump spokesman. So I think she'll do fine in that regard,
Right.
but pretty, well, I mean, I guess there's not much to go off of her experience, but largely, I don't imagine this being a Kissinger-esque administration in the United Nations.
No,
so
we're not a force to be reckoned with. I will say the one thing, though I disagree with Nikki Haley on a lot of things, she came into that job and at times was an independent voice. Yeah. She
came in at an 11.
Yeah.
And took it up to a 15.
She stepped
and
back.
then resigned.
Yeah, and then got out of there while the getting was good. She did make some statements that were contradictory to what the Trump administration was saying, which showed a lot of initiative on her part, you could say. But it's something that I don't imagine we'll be seeing a lot of from her successor. But, you know, I've been surprised before. Odds are I won't be surprised again. That's really all I have to say about Heather Nauert.
Yep. Okay, so then switching to another nomination, right. William Barr was nominated by the Trump administration to be the next U.S. Attorney General. This is following Jeff Sessions' firing soon after the election.
William Barr? Where have I heard that name before?
Wow, well, William Barr was the Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. He served from 91 to 93.
Wow, I remember that fondly.
Yeah, exactly. We were just wee lads on the farm.
Yeah.
Just waiting to move off the farm at that point.
Your analogies never cease.
We weren't freaking alive, Brett. All right, don't look.
Never cease to impress me. Truly.
Oh man. Anyways, But no, he's a well-known conservative lawyer, mostly well-known for him serving in this position under Bush. Besides that, I'm sure that he's qualified, which is a nice change in pace of Trump nominations. And largely, he'll be replacing Matt Whitaker, who hasn't been able to destroy everything like people have been predicting.
As the acting AG, I want to put out there that I predicted that he would be largely negligible in this page of history.
Right. Yes, Brett. Yes,
and I was right.
Your 100% accuracy continues. Let the world know that we're still good at that.
People.
I'm looking at specifically today. I'd like to channel this plug for the fact that Brett and I can predict the future to any form of non-commercial banking.
Stop.
And we'll get into that later, fam. Anyways,
don't listen to him.
So, anyways,
Barr?
William Barr is a 68-year-old Republican with an impressive political resume.
Yeah.
Also, he worked in the CIA for a while, the White House, and then, of course, the Justice Department. That's pretty much it. The man also looks amazing for his age. Can we just take note real quick?
It is impressive to point out that he's only 68 now when he was the AG in 91 and 93. So he's had a lot of experience in this job.
It's impressive.
So what are the implications of a lot of this? I mean, when he took over as the AG under HW, coincidentally, Bobby Mueller was the head of the Department of Justice's criminal division at that time. So they have, at least to some degree, we expect, a working relationship.
Yeah.
Barr has stated that in terms of the Russian investigation, that he'd like to see some more balance in the group, which, as most neutral spectators would note, this has not been a highly partisan or political investigation. It's really been a fairly neutral one that doesn't seem to be unbalanced in any capacity. So I think that tells you whose side he's playing for.
Yeah, and I think that largely the how this is going to go down, and nothing has indicated that he will be very anti-Mueller. He's not going to. Nothing has indicated thus far that he will act as a surrogate of the Trump administration. That he will much more be this traditional Republican-like role.
Maybe.
I hope so.
Maybe.
I hope so.
I mean,
we'll see.
You gain a lot of favor with the Trump administration by kissing ass. So
yeah, it's just weird to think that, especially coming from a lot of these. The White House is a massive issue in regards of actually getting people that are qualified to actually accept nominations and accept positions within the White House and the bureaucracy and and the cabinet and such. And so I think because of that, now that we have this more experienced kind of old-timey Republican conservative, I think that we might see.
I mean, what was Jeff Sessions if not an old-timey conservative?
No, but Jeff Sessions served in the Senate. That man has been corrupted since he popped out of the ground way back in 1800.
Listen.
So anyways, that's all the nominations we have to cover. Moving across the pond over to our good friends over in Germany. So some shit went down, and Harrison over here is our token German sympathizer.
Yikes. What a title to give someone. Get him on the mic.
He's a big fan, and so I apologize for the noise real quick.
Let's get in here.
Okay, so this...
Harrison, introduce yourself again.
Okay, my name's Harrison. I'm a Truman student.
Right.
Political science.
Why do you like Germany so much?
Because they are a symbol, well, at least they have been, a symbol of stability and rising economic power in Europe. And
since when, approximately?
Approximately like 1991.
So we're talking post-unification.
Yeah. Post-unification, the German economic miracle. Yeah, sorry, I was almost gonna say Merkel.
Oh wow, it's almost like those two go hand in hand.
Oh.
Yeah, almost.
Talk to us about the German Merkel.
Okay, so Merkel is currently the Chancellor of Germany. They have a parliament, so head of government, head of state. Wait, that's wrong. They have a president. That's the head of state, and he's unimportant.
Largely symbolic role. If I'm not mistaken.
That is the point
for the non-political scientists out there. She is also the head of their largest party, the CDU, Christian Democratic Union, which is a center-right party in Germany. And it's been having a little trouble recently. They've been losing in the state elections and such. And it's been largely seen as a result of Merkel's migration policies. She famously let 1 million, I think, immigrants into the EU, complying with the EU's wishes. And that has led to some trouble. They've lost a lot. The far-right AfD party, Alternative for Deutschland, has been winning a lot of seats. They like to use like Das Volk, the people, and their campaign slogans and stuff.
Wait
which
a
is
second.
Yeah, that's straight
Hold
out of
up
Nazis.
here.
That's a good old throwback to Hitler. So
I thought all Nazi-related references and things like that were strictly illegal in Germany.
they do have a lot of stuff banned, but it gets
Apparently,
stuff through.
apparently the
yeah.
Volk is okay.
Yeah, so it's a little scary. But it has not only been the far right on the rise. But we see a segmentation of German political life. The Green Party, which has largely been historically a single-issue environmentalist party, has seen extremely good poll results right now. Their polling is the second largest party. If they perform well in the 2021 elections, they will most likely be a part of government. But yes, in summary, there's been a big segmentation of German political life right now from the two big Volksparteien, which is People's Party.
Okay.
There are sort of like the catch-all parties, the CDU, Merkel's party, and the SPD, the center-left party, which is really dropping in the polls. Like I said, CDU's performing really poorly right now. And what's important today is that the CDU had their elections for their new leader, because given the poor statewide results coming in through elections, Merkel said she would step down as party leader of the CDU. So today they had those elections. There were three main candidates. One, AKK, which stands for Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer. She has...
Great name.
Very German name.
Yes.
Kramp-Karrenbauer.
AKK...
I have to yell it.
Yeah. No, you have to yell
Careful.
all German.
Yeah,
She is sort of seen as they call her the mini Merkel's successor. She was Merkel's favorite for the leadership of the party, very much following in her footsteps as pro-migration in the EU, pro-EU, and a continuation of Germany's stable economic growth policies. The other big contender was a man by the name of Friedrich Merz. He used to be in the CDU with Merkel. They had a falling out, I believe, in 2002 or something. And that's not really important, but it shows that he was sort of the antithesis to Merkel. And coming up for the CDU leadership sort of showed a change from Merkel.
Okay.
And he got quite a bit of support, but didn't win. Spoiler alert. Interesting about him, and maybe Adam would like to talk a little about this. He's on the German board of BlackRock, a international asset manager shadow bank.
It's a shadow bank. And we'll get into this after we cover the elections. But I've recently learned a lot about this shadow banking industry, and I'm very interested, everyone. So if we have any listeners from the shadow bank,
This podcast is just turning into people asking for jobs.
honestly, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm asking for a job on a board.
So with this election in Germany, you brought up two interesting points. So we see this rise of this far right group, very concerned about the immigration, very nationalistic approach to things. Merkel steps down because her party isn't doing very well in the polls, and yet her party elects someone who's largely seen in Merkel's image. Coincidentally, we also, as you mentioned, have the Green Party, the single-issue party, who's doing really well. So we have Nazis, tree huggers, and Merkel again. Coming up for the newest election, what are the implications of all of this? As our local German expert, and someone who's studying politics and everything, I mean, what does all of this say to you? What's the direction of Germany right now?
Well, it's as I've said, I think society is becoming more divided.
Okay.
The two Volkspartei, the center catch-all parties, are losing support astronomically. CDU is polling the worst they have in years, and SPD is just below both, I think, the Greens and the AfD right now, which is terrible.
Yeah.
It shows the German society is becoming more fractionalized. What it means for the parties, CDU, I think, needs to be authentic in their values. I think the biggest reason they've been losing is not because of their migration policies, but because of infighting within their party. I didn't talk about this much, but Merkel's, I think, interior minister, Horst Seehofer, is part of it. He's not from the same party. They have a sister party who runs in one of the German states, but it's sort of the same party.
Interesting. Okay.
They're a little more Catholic, a little more traditional, yes. And he has
Catholic
been
wing of the Christian.
yeah,
the Christian
exactly,
something party.
exactly. And he's been a staunch opponent of Merkel's immigration policies.
Okay.
I think it is not the migration policies themselves, but the infighting within the CDU that has led a lot of voters to turn away from them.
And I quickly I want to touch on the mini Merkel aspect of this because AKK has actually pushed back against these. I was reading more about this today, and it said that she tried not to tie herself too closely to the image, and also like about some of her held beliefs that do stray from Merkel's, such as her belief in her reservations about same-sex marriage, adoption rights to couples
stop
like
you
that.
there. Merkel was actually opposed to that as well.
I wasn't sure if that continued. What about and this was something I found kind of striking about her belief that she has reservations about the fact that Turkish citizens and immigrants in Germany having dual citizenship between Turkey and Germany, when Turkey is the largest immigration population in Germany. I wasn't exactly sure if that lined up with Merkel or not.
Is that still true? Because I know
that Turkish people are the largest minority.
Well, I know there's been a lot of the Syrian refugees and things like that, and for a long time, at least earlier this year, they were claiming a lot of issues with the Syrian refugee problem, quote unquote. So is it still? They still have a really large Turkish population.
Yeah, no. Germany has sort of always had a large Turkish population. That's not really corresponding with the migration policies currently of Europe. They've always had like a large Turkish minority.
Interesting.
At least in recent history.
Right. Okay. And so the next election is 2020.
2021, I think.
2021. Why?
Oh man,
I hate that.
It's a parliament. I think it's every 5 years.
Hate
so
that.
I mean,
Every
it could
5 years?
it could be earlier.
Why did they start in an odd year?
Yeah, it could be
Every 5
earlier.
years, start an even year.
because they also, if they dissolve government early due to like a vote of no
If
confidence.
Merkel loses the confidence
Also-
of the Bundestag, then we'll see elections much
So
earlier.
elections weren't held in Germany until 1946. So.
You know, here's the deal. They could have pushed it off 4 more years.
We needed to extend the occupation just to make sure that they engaged.
So this is the part of the podcast where we really just speculate wildly. And again, as our resident German expert, everything that's going on with Brexit right now and the impending collapse of the EU, at least as I'm calling it. I don't know what Merkel's position's been. I don't know what the German government's position's been. But it really looks as if France and Germany are set to kind of emerge from all of this Brexit mess as kind of the new leaders of the EU. Has there been anything in German politics that has kind of spoken to this? Are they wanting to increase economic development, increase military size, something that would kind of indicate them taking the place of the new hegemon in the region?
Yeah, I guess 2 things there, economic and military, you did mention. I can touch on those. I mean, the EU has been a huge economic boon for Germany.
Yeah.
They are the largest exporter there. The AfD, the far-right party, is Eurosceptic, and it just wouldn't be a good...
Eurosceptic, I love that.
It wouldn't be a good economic position to withdraw. So, yeah, like... I don't know what to say about that. Like it is so good for them. And then militarily, I haven't read too much into this. Mm-hmm. Historically, at least from post-unification, Germany has kept post-World War II, Germany has kept a pretty small army relative to their economic might, their geographical size, stuff like that. I know they have been slightly increasing it recently. I think that's been in response to some of Trump's NATO comments, stuff like that. And I don't know, with a resurgent Russia and shit happening in Ukraine and stuff like that, it might be decent to look into maybe expanding Germany's military might.
And I can touch on this briefly too, because I think as far as superpowers within Europe go militarily, I think within the EU after England pulled out, I think the largest military power capability-wise is still Germany. I think Poland is number 2, and then it would be France. But like
fuck Theresa May.
That's,
yeah.
That's a hot take.
All right, well, that's in. That's staying in.
That in.
Keep it in.
So we touched on economics there a little bit, and we opened up this segment with the impending German advance of shadow banking. So we're going to let Adam have his soapbox, and we're going to discuss a little bit about shadow banking. Adam, you have approximately 3 minutes.
All right, everybody. So, this week on the podcast, I learned about shadow banking. Shadow banking is actually a broad term for all banking institutions that are not commercial banks. And commercial banks are what all of us traditionally believe or think of as a bank.
A bank is only what you believe it to be.
Yeah, basically. Welcome to constructivism. But no, basically, the major difference is that within commercial banks, individuals can loan money, or not loan, but they put money into banks that is then capped and insured by the FDIC and other international, this happens all over the world. And basically, so the major difference is that there's no regulation, no protection for the inner workings of this bank and the money loaned into it.
How do you find out about it if it's not commercialized?
Basically, it's because there's many different kinds of shadow banks, and they can be anywhere from investment banks, such as like Fidelity, to other asset management banks, and there's a whole wide range of things, and a lot of stuff that'll qualify. I don't know a lot about.
Fair.
But
it's the shadowy part.
Yeah. But but that's the thing though, is that shadow, I think, it just makes it sound way worse than it really is in regards of, it's not, okay. So it really depends on the shadow bank, because a lot of shadow banks you can see, on the street.
You sound like a crazy person. You go, some shadow banks aren't that bad.
They're not.
Some of them can be quite good.
Like Fidelity's a good bank.
So tell me about the good aspects of a shadow bank.
Well,
tell me what's good about a shadow bank.
The nice things about shadow banks is the fact that they have large amounts of assets, especially internationally, large amounts of reach, and traditionally they do a lot of functioning in regards to investment into small business, small corporations, and that kind of thing. Like what they largely do is give businesses other means of seeking wealth and asset management. However, after the 2008 banking crisis, this is when shadow banking became a concern initially because of the asset management they do. What happened with a lot of these is that they actually were able to hide a lot of the funds and some of the risk that was actually present within the commercial banking that led to the fall of the housing market and other international banking and financial institutions.
Right. So why are wealthy people wanting to put their money in a shadow bank?
Because some shadow banks are really fucking sketchy. For example, the shadow banking industry is like a $72 trillion industry, which is insane. Shadow banking has been increasingly important in China, with a large amount of China's capital investment actually done outside of regulated banks on the international market. The United States does have these present. As we mentioned, BlackRock is the largest in the United States. Their assets reach, I think, $28 trillion.
How shadowy can it be if we know the name of it?
Well, they actually trade on the United States Stock Exchange.
How shadowy is that then?
Exactly.
What the hell?
And so this is the thing, is that there's a lot of we don't know enough about them to call them not sketchy, but when you trade when you trade on Wall Street, you also then question, how sketchy can you really be?
I only want to bank at a place that resembles a speakeasy, as in I can't find it, and it changes location every 6 weeks because it's getting raided by the police.
Yeah.
That's what I want a shadow bank to
Basically.
be.
But, I mean, the financial world is just a shadowy place in general.
That's absolutely wild to me. I had no idea this was even a thing.
And this is interesting. I see, this is when we thought of shadow banking, I definitely thought of, Casino Royale, that financial institution that is Bond villains. That's what I initially thought.
You've explained it to me, and I still think that's what it is. That's what
Anyways.
I've taken away from all of this.
So, now you guys know that Fidelity is a shadow bank. Congratulations.
So, final question. Can I legally keep all of my money under my mattress and call my bedroom the shadow bank?
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Done. Deal.
All right. When we come back, everyone, we're going to get into Wisconsin and North Carolina.
And how our democracies once again failing us.
Well, I mean, that's just a perpetual
Democracies
thing.
once again failing us. Learn about it after the break.
All right, welcome back to the pod, everybody.
Okay, so after that, truly engaging conversation.
Now that I have been replaced by a clone and the camera is off.
Adam knows far too much. We're going to talk about some of the more interesting headlines from this week.
Replaced by a clone just like that. What was it?
Yeah, oh my god.
Yes, the president of Nigeria. Okay,
God.
quick tangent, everybody.
This week really went off the rails. This week was great. Talking about conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
there's a great one out of Nigeria.
This is what we got into the topic at lunch. Oh man, Brett.
Yeah,
take it away.
so I was just going through the headlines this week, as I am one to do, and I think actually it was a push notification I got on my phone one morning. I just wake up, and NPR, the headline reads something along the lines of, Nigerian president gives speech at UN, claims he was not replaced by a twin or a clone or something. Apparently there's been some rumor circulating in Nigeria that their president was assassinated and replaced by a Senegalese lookalike or something like that. And it's gotten so bad that it has forced him to go to the international stage and talk about how he's definitely not been replaced, which is super something that someone who's been replaced by a lookalike would say. So, as bad as things get, at least we'll never be as entertaining as Nigeria.
Yep.
That was a fun thing.
Oh,
that we
man.
touched on. That's a good little chuckle.
That really is. I'm glad. I hope all of you at home are laughing and not steering out of the lane by which you're driving in. And,
Absolutely. All of you at home that are driving.
well, I mean, some are home, some are driving, some
Yeah.
are doing other things. We don't really want to know what they are. So,
It's playing RuneScape.
like Harrison here.
So, a little bit back on topic. There have been some fun but troubling headlines from this past week. Remember every single week that we keep saying we're done talking about the election?
Because we're not, because Republicans want us to keep talking about
God, it turns out we'll never actually be done. So we have 3 states we want to focus on for this week. North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Michigan, because there's been some absolute, and again, the Shakespearean term, fuckery's been going on. Quick note, North Carolina, one of their congressional election results has been called into question because plot twist, someone might have stolen a bunch of ballots. Wisconsin and Michigan are both engaged in usurping the executive from a challenging party.
And using North Carolina's playbook, which they did the same exact thing in 2016 as a record of doing so.
Right.
Yeah.
So to get into all this, we'll start with North Carolina.
And just give you some backstory of how what they did is being currently done in Wisconsin and
Right.
Michigan currently. So basically, back in 2016, a Democratic governor was elected to the state of North Carolina. Now, to give you some background, North Carolina is a southern state that has a very large African American and Democratic population. However, it
Consistently
has
red for some reason.
because of gerrymandering, voter suppression,
Weird.
and other means of, again, fuckery.
Fun politicking.
Exactly. So basically, to give you this, there was a very strong turnout for Democrats in North Carolina. Trump did win the state, but in terms of state legislature, congressional and Senate races, there was a lot of, they're very close, and Democrats performed extremely well as far as voting. However, because North Carolina is about as representative as Russia currently, the Republican Party was able to take majorities in the state legislature, within the federal, the House of Representatives and Senate.
And what that means, basically, being as representative of Russia, it means that there were a bunch of votes given to people that didn't win.
Yeah.
People won popular votes that didn't end up getting their seats in the legislature, and that's done through gerrymandering, which enables the legislatures to draw districts in such a way that they can essentially negate the political will or political mandate, or electoral mandate of certain populations.
Yeah.
And we saw this in North Carolina. We see this across the country.
Mm-hmm. And importantly, what you see as a result of that is you can see statewide elections, like the governor's race, going Democrat, but the rest of the state going overwhelmingly red.
Right.
Which is a giant fucking red flag.
We saw that a lot in the Midwest. in
Yeah.
2018.
Oh, that too. I mean, and it's just like. So, anyways, just to get back into this, so Democrat Roy Cooper was elected to North Carolina, and what basically the Republicans did within the House, what they called the governor who was
This was in 2016. by the way.
2016. The outgoing governor called a special session, and they passed a bunch of legislation very quickly that basically stripped the Democrat of a shit ton of power, and basically were able to retain large amounts of authority in regards to how to conduct elections, and just a lot of other shit that was going on in North Carolina. And not to go too much into it, because this is exactly what Wisconsin and Michigan
we'll give you
are
more
doing.
concrete
but
details with these other states, but
this started this tradition of basically really just screwing over the incoming candidate from the other party, and a way of basically subverting the will of the people and the representative, democratic vote that did occur.
right.
So
So that's the history of North Carolina and what they're doing. We'll come back to them because now it's good to touch on what Wisconsin and Michigan are doing, which is exactly that. So a piece by Sean Johnson and Laurel White on NPR came out today, and detailing basically what happened. So specific to Wisconsin, on Wednesday, after overnight debate, the Wisconsin Senate voted to restrict the incoming Democratic governor, Mike Evers, I believe is Tony Evers, excuse me, to restrict Tony Evers from following through on various campaign promises, like pulling Wisconsin out of a multi-state lawsuit challenge to the Affordable Care Act. They also limited Evers' ability to limit They also voted to limit early voting in Wisconsin and to make it more difficult for Evers to alter Wisconsin's voter ID law. So basically, and legally, they can do these kinds of things. They can pass laws that make these things harder. It's not technically an overreach of the legislature to impede on some of these things. But it's very on the nose when these things are done in a lame duck session, specifically targeted towards the campaign promises of the governor that just won.
exactly. And so the outgoing governor, Scott Walker, has... Did he approve?
Yeah, he'll sign it either today or
He
next
has
week.
expressed support. And what you've seen over the past week is a bunch of phenomenal videos of constituents of the Wisconsin legislature just screaming in the state assembly and just yelling at these people for what they're doing. There's a phenomenal video of this old woman after some of these some of the Republican representatives came out and started talking about how they sought the need to do this, and this old woman in the crowd is just screaming shame.
Shame.
It's so good.
For shame.
It's so good. Kind of like Cersei Lannister walking through the streets.
Exactly.
It's good.
And it's
deserved, damn it.
It's just repulsive. And Michigan is I believe it's Michigan. Am I lying? Is it not Michigan? I can't find this. Wisconsin and there's another state. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Michigan's doing this
I just
too.
can't find an article on NPR about it. My only news source is NPR. But this is troubling for a number of reasons. I don't think we really have to explain to you why this is awful. I mean, the people went to the booths, went to the polls, and chose this person to represent them, and now all these other people are essentially limiting the electoral mandate because a couple people would be mad at the political nuance and the political implications of putting a Democrat in office, like being able to Tony Evers was not promising anything that would have been radical. He just wanted to take Wisconsin out of the Affordable Care Act lawsuit, protect health care for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites, wanted to expand early voting and limit voter ID laws. These are three things that benefit tons of people, that don't really impede on anybody's pocketbooks, and politically should be a popular thing to do. And yet we have this mass resistance from a Republican Party that is really denying a peaceful transition of power. And it's frightening.
It is.
It's frightening.
And it's just... It just sets such an awful precedent.
Yeah.
And the fact that North Carolina was able to get away with this is, first off, a red flag. But the fact that we are being able to continuously see this, and largely, this of course would never happen. While the Republicans in this have come out and said that, these are, they're just trying to balance the power between the governorship and the state house, this would never have fucking happened if Scott Walker had been reelected to office for his 6th term.
Yeah, again, Wisconsin, Michigan, we saw it in North Carolina. We've seen this in Alabama, Arkansas. We talked about how gerrymandering is a political tactic to kind of consolidate power. I think we would be remiss to necessarily assign this kind of shady political behavior to one party over another. We're seeing it a lot more with the Republican Party right now because they're losing power. But I mean, oh God, is it New York, New Jersey? There's some state right now that their own Supreme Court is telling them they have to redraw their. There's a Democratic Supreme Court. Start over. Democratic state whose Supreme Court is telling them to redraw their district lines because they gerrymandered the fuck out of them in a way that's frankly unconstitutional. We saw something similar happening in Louisiana or Maryland, one of the two. So this is just poor political behavior.
Yeah, and it's
that we need to rein in.
We really do. We really do.
Come on, people.
And this does go back, and I think we can draw some limbs out here in regards of
limbs.
Because I don't know. It's,
Draw
again,
and quarter some limbs.
I swear to God.
I'm so sorry. I can't let things go.
I try to get into it, and you're like, oh no, we're just gonna make fun of Adam real quick.
This is a dumb thing. Let's get into it.
Regardless, no, I think that what you see here is just a lack of oversight by which the government has needed to be doing that is really failing us in regards to pursuing democratic elections that actually fulfill the mandates of the people. Yeah. And I think that one of the major issues you see this is not enough accountability from the Supreme Court of the United States to strike down maps that have overwhelming present amounts of gerrymandering.
Well, we don't have precedent from the Supreme Court to talk about gerrymandering.
Well, they did, though.
State Supreme Courts have.
Yes, but no, the Supreme Court of the United States did strike down, in 2011, they struck down a Senate map drawn by North Carolina, initially on forms of racial bias in gerrymandering.
If that was in 2011...
Yeah, right after they took power. And
okay.
Yeah.
Was it what you said? It was the United States Supreme Court?
I was positive.
You can
do
that. You can draw lines based on race, but it cannot be the primary motive.
The Supreme Court's stance and precedent related to gerrymandering has been interesting because if it's a majority-minority district drawn for the reason of race, that's okay. But it has to be, like, there are really weird boundaries that are set.
Yeah.
And so I'd be very surprised if this Supreme Court, as it's currently made up, is going to take any sort of stance on it.
And I think that this is partly the reason by which Republicans feel okay enough to do this. Like, largely, this is the issue is that's what I'm trying to get at is that this starts at the national level of the Supreme Court currently being held by Republicans and not being willing to take the action necessary to make states actually representative of the people. Mm-hmm. And since states are able to do that, then what you have then is an unregulated and unrepresentative state that has then a statewide has a shit ton of gerrymandered districts that maintain one party in power, and yet with statewide elections, then they're able to actually turn over power to other parties. And then what happens with that is then you have opposed unrepresentative states headed by people of opposing parties, and then that infighting between the two will ultimately lead then to what we're seeing now, which is just the breakdown of democratic institutions within these states. And this is unacceptable on both sides. And while the Republican Party, I think, has been the available party to be able to really do these things because the 2010...
they've had the power.
Yeah, the 2010 midterms really fucking hurt us.
Yeah.
But one of the fears, I think, is that if we're able to overcome these things, largely some major issues is the fact that the Democrats are going to be the ones taking power in 2020. I'm calling it now. We're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's only appropriate that we do that. Pendulum's got to swing
exactly.
back.
And what happens then, since that is a census year, is that then we get to redraw the districts. But the fear is that if we do this again, and we choose to go down the same path the Republican Party does, if we're able to overcome the gerrymandered districts by which we were able to do so in 2018, if we're able to do this again, and we then have the power to do this, I am fearful.
Yeah.
I'm fearful that we will do it. No, I don't want us to do it.
No, I agree.
No.
I agree. I think my overarching point, or at least my point of frustration with a lot of this, is that we are seeing all of this happen, and God, you know that if this was the other way around, if we were the ones stripping power of a freshly elected executive, there would be a well-coordinated campaign from the right that would be completely denouncing all of this. We would have Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and all of your usual suspects tweeting about it from the Senate. You would have Fox News lambasting it 24/7 about Democratic unholy takeover and all this kind of nonsense. And we haven't, the left has not touched this with a 10-foot pole outside of the immediate vicinities of Wisconsin and Michigan. And yeah, we've been talking about it, but it has not been the aggressive campaign to bring awareness to this. And I think this highlights a very big inadequacy within the Democratic Party and its lefty friends, is that we just don't have a messaging system. We need people to know about this and to care about this. This is a very serious takeover of our democratic institutions, and people can't be bothered by it. We went to the polls in 2018. We did our job. Why do we have to give a shit until 2020 rolls around? It's the wrong attitude to have, and I don't want us to fall susceptible to it. But you know what? Looks like that's where we're at. Be more motivated, people. Be activated. Jesus Christ.
Do better is what
Do
Brett's
better,
saying.
America.
Do better. Honestly, yeah. America really does need to do better. Do we want to get into some Russia stuff?
You know, I think it's only appropriate.
Only appropriate that we
Last
move on.
A little bit of time, yeah.
So-
spend as much time as we could harping on that.
The Mueller investigation, as Brett has predicted, and which I will not be touching, is going to be coming to a close.
I think it's beginning the process of wrapping up.
Well worded right
That's
there.
as definitive as I'm willing to get. I think it's
Basically-
close to maybe potentially wrapping up.
And some indications of this have been much more recently. More indictments.
God, everyone's going to jail lately.
Yes, actually, finally, like cases being fully decided in terms of like Papadopoulos, Manafort, and that kind of thing. These people are then leaving, and they're going, and they are actually being held accountable, which is a very good sign. And what you see is an uptick.
An uptake.
An uptake. You did
We're
it,
Scottish
you
now.
did it again. You
We're looking at an uptake.
son of a bitch.
You hear?
Is Joe America gonna make an appearance on the pod? No. So John Kelly has been basically is going to be interviewed by Mueller as far as the investigation into the obstruction probe.
So who's that guy?
John Kelly.
Who's John
He's
Kelly?
our current chief of staff to the White House and the president.
Yep.
John Kelly has been there for a while. It has been predicted that he's been leaving for a long-ass time, but it's usually a good indication if you talk to Mueller, you're getting out of there, a.k.a. people like Papadopoulos, people like Gates, people like Manafort, and people like Michael Cohen. That's what I was looking for. That's what I was really looking for.
What I was thinking.
Yeah.
So today's a big day of big news for the Russia stuff and for Bobby Mueller. So as of today, as of December 7th, this is Robert Mueller's deadline in 2 federal court cases.
Oh, okay. Real quick, I misspoken. He was interviewed by a special counsel.
Yeah, that already
Oh,
happened
yeah.
earlier
Oh,
today.
shoot.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Robert Mueller is facing 2 deadlines in 2 federal court cases today involving former Trump insiders. So as I mentioned, Friday, today's the deadline in federal court in D.C. They're requesting a document spelling out how President Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, allegedly violated his plea agreement. So to get you up to speed, Paul Manafort pled guilty in September to 2 conspiracy charges in Washington and agreed to cooperate fully and truthfully with federal prosecutors, including Mueller's team, with regards to Russian interference in the 2016 election. Last week, Mueller's office found out that Manafort had repeatedly lied to prosecutors since agreeing to cooperate, which is a violation of the plea deal, which is a really, really good way to get yourself sent to jail. So the information is expected to be made public at some point today. So by the time you're listening to this, the headlines should be revealing a lot more about it. But really, really big news that Mueller's team is officially submitting this document of crimes and lies, it says, to the D.C. federal court. So that's a really exciting one.
Okay, yeah. Also, just to go back to some Kelly stuff.
Absolutely.
Importantly, he was largely questioned by Mueller today about things that McGahn had reported.
Don McGahn.
Don McGahn, who was a former chief financial advisor to Trump.
Yep.
And who was interviewed for like 36 hours or something like this earlier this year. Initially, Kelly did not testify before Mueller in the summer, as he was initially requested to, but eventually did. Largely, he will most likely. I'm making a prediction, Brett.
Make a prediction.
By Christmas, Kelly's gone.
that's
He is
bold.
no
That's
longer
2 weeks.
he's no longer on speaking terms with Trump, and will most likely be removed from the White House
Isn't
within the
that
coming days.
so great when our chief of staff is not speaking? to
That's
the president?
ridiculous.
Love that about that.
That's fucking ridiculous.
Another
That's like
thing,
not having just like not using your left hand.
right?
Like literally,
yeah.
that's it. It's like, you know what I'm not doing? I'm not using it. It's
Why
still
use-
there, but I'm not using it.
Why use your left hand when it only takes the right hand to turn on Fox News? That's all our president does all day. That was the joke.
That was a good one.
Thank you. So other exciting news that came from this week, we touched on last week, but Paul Manafort, that plea deal collapsed last week, basically, in light of this new information. So we know that he's going to go to jail soon. Michael Cohen, earlier this week, pled guilty to lying to Congress about the infamous 2016 Trump Tower meeting. As his case begins to go forward, as we really wrap those things up, Cohen's fate is very closely tied to Donald Trump Jr.'s fate. And
Yeah, he
then we
is.
get to see the exciting exchange of how far is Donald Trump willing to go for his children. And
Probably
wow,
not far.
I know this feels like a really
Only
shitty-
for Ivanka.
This feels like a really shitty Game of Thrones episode where we have to say, I'm wondering what this person's willing to do to save their children. Like, these are human beings we're talking about. Also despicable human beings who are very
I love the
guilty,
Trump crime family.
implicated in high crimes and misdemeanors. But if Donald Trump Jr. is indicted on anything, if he has to go before any sort of jury, if he has to go before Congress again, I can very easily see this devolving into a Nixon-esque claims of executive privilege, and we're going to watch the Supreme Court test just how far executive privilege extends to the family, just how much, to the extent of which the president's able to pardon others, including potentially himself if we get far enough along down the road. So when I say that the Mueller thing is beginning to wrap up, I think much more in the sense of we're getting to the point where we're really seeing just how implicit a lot of these people very close to Trump are in a lot of these crimes. I don't think we're anywhere near impeachment. I don't think we're anywhere near the president potentially going to jail. I think we're about to have all the cards laid on the table, and we'll see how far politicking can get us, which with everything that we've discussed this week so far, very pessimistic about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Oh,
But at least we'll know just how much of a criminal our president and his immediate family are.
Yeah,
Is.
I think that's fair. So, I think
We really should have ended with the Nigeria story.
that's
I'm
pretty good.
still-
Actually, I think I'd like to. We'll end with this, and that listeners, next week's going to be Brett and I's last podcast together at Truman State
That
University.
is so sad.
Right? Isn't that crazy? This is the last time we'll be doing
God.
this together in person for
The
a while.
emotional trauma.
Though I don't have work on Fridays next semester, so like, my ass will be here sometimes.
Yeah, so this is an announcement not for the ending of the podcast.
No,
but
we're not ending it. This isn't season. Do we want to have a season 2?
yeah.
Shoot.
We could take a little. We could take a
Ooh.
little Christmas break if you want. We could come back with a season 2, or we can keep going.
We can keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can keep going.
All right.
But a very important thing to point out is that for next semester, young Adam here will be down in Jefferson City, working in the Capitol. And what that means is that you are going to get a lot of Missouri information next
Oh,
semester.
yes.
Yeah, but basically it's going to be a much bigger focus on state and local government for next semester and the intricacies of what local politics looks like.
Here
I'm very
in the
excited.
Midwest. It's exciting
Yeah.
stuff.
So remember when we opened up this podcast and we talked about how the 36% is going to be all about
The Midwest.
The Midwest.
Lol.
Now it'll finally be about the Midwest. We'll stop talking about
we
Nigeria.
made. Season 1 was basically just an entire lead up to what's going on in the world. Brett and I honing our skills as podcast co-hosts before we actually got to what we set out
What
as
we
the
meant to do
primary
this entire
objective.
time, which is to provide you with relevant information to your lives.
So-
maybe we'll get there.
So, anyways,
I don't know.
next podcast, Brett and I are going to talk a bit more about 2020 because we haven't done that yet, and some potential. We'll talk about the Democratic March Madness.
Yeah.
That's going
We're
to
gonna
be-
continue with the national.
The national stuff, but it's important to talk about our next president of the United States.
Absolutely.
Insert name here,
Yeah.
President
Bernie
Hillary
Sanders.
Clinton. No,
All right. Well, that's all I got.
that's all we have too. Yeah, we'll do it.
We'll get into the post roll. Hold your horses there, Harrison. Hold your horses. Well, thank you so much. We're going to start the music now, and
really.
we're going to hit the credits.
The 36% was founded, written, and directed by Adam Childers Arnold and Brett Combs.
Music in this episode is provided by Purple Planet. You can check them out at purple-planet.com.
The presenting sponsor of the 36% is Avian Apparel.
That code, the 36, still works, just so you know.
15% off, fam. 15.
Music editing in this podcast is done either by Burnt Crumbs or Adam Childers Arnold. We haven't decided yet.
And our ukulele muse, as always, is Adam California.
Our cover art, our wonderful cover art, was provided by Christian Ferguson.
And some special thanks to Harrison Brunch for joining us on the pod today.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Brett and Adam for inviting me to play RuneScape for most of the episode. I'd like to give a shout out to my mom. I love you.
Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the 36%. It's been a joy to make this.
It truly has been.
And we're looking forward to whatever the future has. As always, I'm Brett.
And I'm Adam.
And this has been
the 36%.